Well, happy Wednesday, AP Stats. We're already halfway through the week. I would like to start today's class off by showing you the AP Stats Google Drive folder and just how to organize it a bit. So I'm going into AP Stats. So we're going to name Unit 1 Exploring One Variable Data. So Unit 1 Exploring One Variable Data. So College Board reorganized some of their material. So Unit 1, exploring one variable data. And then Chapter 1 is what we just finished. So I have mine elsewhere, but all of your Chapter 1 stuff for data analysis, so smelling Parkinson's, how many shoes there are, how many shoes you own, where do I stand, all of the activities that we did should be in this folder along with your FRQ exam and Unit 1 multiple choice exam. And Chapter 2, which we're starting today, is called Modeling Distributions of Data. So here's where all your Chapter 2 stuff is going to go. All right. Now we are going to go ahead and work on percentiles. So we are going to be working with the where do I stand data, or should I say more scenario. So our learning targets that we want to achieve today are find and interpret the percentile of an individual value within a distribution of data and estimate percentiles and individual values using a cumulative relative frequency graph. So how does my height compare with other AP Stat students? The dot plot below represents a random sample of the heights of 20 AP Stat students to the nearest inch. So first off, let's do some review. Go ahead and describe the distribution. All right, so just remember you want to describe the distribution using shape, outliers, center, and variability in context. So we're dealing with AP Stat student heights. So the shape of the distribution is, let's say that looks fairly symmetric, fairly roughly. You could even say bimodal since there's two towers. Are there any outliers? So it looks like there is an outlier here and here. So there are outliers at 56 and 78. You can do your IQR rule just to be sure, but for time's sake, I'm going to say 56 and 78 are outliers. In the center, is around the mean, since we have our 5-number summary here, 67.45 inches, and the standard deviation is 4.807 inches. So there's a rough description. So the shape of the distribution, I'm just going to insert here of heights. Oops. is fairly symmetric. There's shape. There are outliers at 56 and 78. The center is the mean of 67.45 inches, and the standard deviation is 4.807. So number 2, Ariana is 65 inches tall. What percent of the heights are less than or equal to 65? So there are 5 values, and I marked on our dot plot 65. There are 5 dots out of the 20 total AP Stat students. You should get 0.25, and as a percentage, 25%. So we would say that this 25%, so at the 25th percentile, this is calculating a percentile. So the values of the data value that we pick, so the percent of the values that are below that data value. So what is your height in inches? Well, I am 63 inches. And if we look at our dot plot, I'm going to say that 63 is here. And there are 3 values below my height. So 3 out of 20 for me. And that is 0.15, which is 15%. So I'm in the 15th percentile. So now we're going to work with our frequency, relative frequency, and cumulative frequency. So go ahead and find the frequencies and the relative frequency. All right, so if we look here, so the number of dots that are between 56 and 60. So 56 and 60, there's just one dot. So this one dot is between 56 and 60. So the dots between 61 and 65, there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. For 66 to 70, there's 11. From 71 to 75, there's 3. From 76 to 80, there's 1. And the way to calculate relative frequency is just the percentage. So we're going to take 1 out of the total number of values, which is 20. So you get 5%. And likewise with the heights for 61 to 65, 4 out of 20, you get 20%, and so on and so forth. Now, for cumulative frequency, we start with our 5% for the 56 to 60 heights. So we're going to start with 5%. And well, we want to know, so cumulative, we're going to add all of these percentages, but we can't just simply add 5 plus 20 plus 55 plus 15 plus 5%. So how, I guess you could say, like, how much percentage is between 56 to 65 from 56, heights of 56 to heights of 65? Well, we would take 5%, add it to the 20%, and you would get 25%. Well, now what about from the heights of 56 to 70? Well, we would take then 25 to 55, and you would get 80%. Now 80 plus 15, and you get 95%. From 95, add that 5%, and you get 100%. And that's how we calculate our cumulative relative frequency. So now for number 4, we're going to use the info in the table to create a cumulative relative frequency graph. So you can start by creating a histogram. So for the interval of 55 to 60, there's a frequency of 1. Oops. Just undo that. So 1's about there. For 60 to 65, there's 4. For 65 to 70, there's 11. Sorry guys, scratch that. Go back, go back. Hopefully you didn't ruin your graph. But anyways, we're creating a cumulative relative frequency graph. So we want to change our scale here. So I thought something was off, but it does still start at 0, but I'm going to put our 0 here. And we're going to cross off this 20. And keep in mind we're dealing with percentage. So I'm going to put 0.20. Instead of the value of 40, we're going to put 0.40. Instead of 60, we're going to put 0.60 to represent the 60%. Instead of 80, I'm going to put 0.80. And then instead of 100, I'm just going to put 1 for 100%. So keep in mind these are our percentiles. We want to make sure that we start at 0. Now let's go ahead and start creating our bin sizes, and it'll help to create a histogram. So for the bin 55 to 60, there's 5% within that. So 5% is about here. This makes more sense. For 61 to 65, there's 25%. 25% is about there. For the bin of 66 to 70, we have 80%. For the bin of 71 to 75, there's 95%. So that's about here. Horrible sketch, but it'll do. For the bin of 76 to 80, that's the rest of the way up. So it should add up to 100%. Yes, there we go. All right. So remember, we're making a relative frequency graph, so histograms really help with that. So I would take a different color, and we always start at 0. So our first point we're going to make at 55, and then it's going to go to 60 where our histograms meet there. And we're just going to draw a line and connect the dots. Then go to the next corner of the 2 bins, the next corner where the 2 bins meet, so on and so forth, and then draw your lines. And there we have our cumulative relative frequency graph. So some things to keep in mind. So you see where this steep slope is here? Well, a steep slope means that there's many values between there. So when there's a big jump like that, just keep in mind there are a lot of values between 66 to 70, that interval. Now let's go ahead and start with the questions. So Ms. Acevedo is 66 inches in this problem rather than 63 inches tall. So estimate and interpret the percentile she is at using the graph. So let me pick a different color here. So if I'm 66 inches, I'm just gonna go right here and I'm just going to follow this up, and I'm going to follow this over. It'd be better to use a ruler for this, but it's really nice and easy to read a cumulative relative frequency graph. So my height, I'm just gonna say this is 66 inches tall. And I'm just estimating and interpreting the percentile. So I'm gonna say that's about 30% of students are either at 66 inches or below Miss Acevedo's height. Not too bad. What about part B? So estimate and interpret the 80th percentile. So that's just reading the graph backwards. So let me go get another color. So if I'm looking at the 80th percentile, so keep in mind here are percentiles. I'm going to take 80 and roughly follow it all the way, it looks like, to 70. And so there's 70. So 70 inches, 80% of heights are at or below 70 inches. And there we go. So let's go ahead and go over our big ideas for today's lesson. So for learning target number 1, I just want to touch on the definition of percentile. And that's the percentage or the percent of values that are less than or equal to a given value. Another thing when we're expressing percentiles or writing about them, don't say in percentile, but say at. So at percentile blank, but don't say in. So for writing, in regards to writing, say at and not in. And in regards to learning target number 2, okay, so I just figured instead of having you guys watch me write out learning target number 2, I figured having it already written and then explaining would be a lot nicer and more efficient for time. So for learning target number 2, cumulative relative frequency graph, keep in mind we're talking about the percentiles. So cumulative relative frequency graph goes with percentiles. For your graph, I want you to know we want to make sure that it ends at 1 but starts at 0. So keep in mind also that our dot should touch the horizontal line. And you should have a nice scale of your data values. And I also want you to know that quartiles and quartile 1 and 3, as well as the median, we can see that quartile 1, oh my gosh, I can't talk, but quartile 1 is the 25th percentile, the median is the 50th percentile, and quartile 3 is the 75th percentile. So think of your quarters, quartile 1, quartile 2, quartile 3. So quarters, and you're going to need that for your check for understanding for part B. So email me if you have any questions. I'm here, and good luck on your homework. And I will see you live for our Google Meet tomorrow.